Uh, Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Berlin. I'm Janis Sivka. I am now the replacement of Alexander Tam. So obviously I'm not Alex, but I'm very happy to be here with you and guiding you through the second day of your program today. And I'm glad that so many are here again. I also always love these conferences where you have time differences and different countries, because it really feels international, even though we are all on Zoom. Yeah, if you like, maybe you want to also open your camera and wave into the groups, so that everyone at least sees your face a little bit. I know that yesterday you had a little bit of an agreement that in the presentations, maybe we all want to relax our eyes a bit and take out the camera. However, then I think in the beginning and during the group sessions, it's very nice that we have some faces here for the exchange. So I'm happy if we can have that. Also a reminder about the interpretation. So make sure that you switch to the correct channel. You have to pick the language that you want to listen to. I will try to be decisive about the language and either pick English or German for blocks of moderation, and if I have someone speaking with who is from either Germany or the UK, I will try to adapt with the language there. Yeah, so that's for some housekeeping. Just to also introduce myself shortly, so you know who is actually talking all the time. My name is Janis Sivka. I'm living in Berlin, but I'm coming from the city of Münster, a city which is also very internationally involved. Maybe some of you know. And I'm a trainer in civic education. I also do facilitation. I'm very happy to be with you here today with the virtual partnership conference of Urban Diplomacy Exchange, and welcome you now here on Zoom. Yes, so because this is indeed the second day, let's have a look back what already happened yesterday. And I will just go quickly through the program, and then we will have some lovely graphic recordings to be shown to you. So you also get a little bit of a treat for all the exchange that you mastered yesterday, and that being put in a very nice graphic way. And we will also have a look at the results of the group discussions. So yesterday, you started with an input from Martino Miraglia, who was coming from the UN Habitat, talking about urban diplomacy in the 2030 agenda and why cities have a responsibility in these times of multiple crises. And afterwards, we had a panel with Daniel Pejic from Melbourne, Susan Aitken from Glasgow, and Martin van der Putten from Dortmund about urban diplomacy as an instrument for achieving global goals. And just as today, the day was closed with a group session. So some of you discussed urban diplomacy in the context of peace, and some of you took a focus on climate action and exchange about examples on how you can strengthen the city cooperation in these times, and or when, for example, migration and refugee integration is very important, and also the local implementation of climate action is very important to also attract citizens and involve them in the policy processes. So this was for the program. Let's have a look at how this looks like when you put it in a much nicer way than just words. And we have Sebastian Lörscher, who is a graphic facilitator and was introduced to you yesterday, and he will show you now on the screen.
Yeah, good morning. I'm going to give you a little wrap up of what happened yesterday. Okay, so I hope you all see the graphic recording. All right, so this is, I'm going to give you a wrap up of the first part that I actually attended. In the workshop, I was not there anymore. But here on the welcoming remarks, you see, it always takes a bit longer. Okay, no, it's there. So Mr. Alexander Wagner said that cities are a catalyst for transformation and innovation. And that actually here, it happens that, yeah, cities shape in a sustainable way. And so we have a lot to learn from cities. But also we have to keep in mind, he said, the concept of leave no one behind, so that the global north has a responsibility for a sustainable change for the global south. Mr. Marius Korte was more going into the crisis that we're facing at the moment. And he said, like, in these times of crisis, it's very important that friends keep on exchanging. And here we have many friends from Germany and the UK. And yeah, and he said that the dialogues that we have, they are the ray of hope in these times. So the voices of the cities should be heard more. Yeah, again, crisis. Mr. Moritz Pieper said that at the moment, democracy is under great threat. You all know why. We need to strengthen it. And one way to strengthen it are, for example, the town twinnings we have, and we need to cross borders so we can prevent the countries from drifting apart. Then we had a little keynote about some project information about urban diplomacy exchange. And yeah, what we heard is that the key is actually we want to strengthen collaborations between city, and for that we promote exchange. And how is this exchange coming along? You see here now two bigger cities on the left and right talking with each other about climate protection, sustainable city planning, but also migrations, how to handle natural disasters, and common goals and visions. And of course, when you have some good ideas, it's always good to share it. And here also I noted some of the goals for this whole urban diplomacy, like peace and security, urban cooperation, and of course achieving the Agenda 2030, and also the internationalization of cities. Yeah, that was this part. Then I move further. After that, we heard a keynote of Mr. Miralia. I don't know if I pronounce it right. And he talked about some of our challenges. So the challenge is, how do we synchronize our actions? And also, how do we include poorer cities in our process? And also, we need to find new channels to express our needs, legal, financial, ecological needs. And in the end, he actually said that cities are not very well represented in the big summits like COP, SDG Summit, Summit for the Future, and so on. We need more local representatives and create an international multi-level dialogue. After that, we had a panel discussion with three representatives from different cities, the city of Melbourne, Glasgow, and Dortmund. And here, Mr. Daniel Pejic said, yeah, that at the moment there are more and more city networks And because there are way more possibilities to participate in discussions at the moment. And this is actually also thanks to COVID-19. So because of the pandemic, the solidarities between cities grew. We heard from Glasgow, from Susan Aitken, that cities have to be more ambitious and have more targets. They have more ambitious targets than the governments, and they're actually leading the way. They delivered solutions for the big topics, like also again climate and handling migration and displaced people. So yeah, here are the cities saying, listen to us. So we have to be more present on the national level. So the separation of local and national activities is no longer trending, is what she said. Yeah, urban diplomacy is the driving factor for welfare. That's what Martin van der Putten said. And he told us some examples, what he did in Dortmund or what he's doing in Dortmund. So they have they created an urban dialogues Dortmund. This is a monthly city exchange with other cities, but he also stretched on the point that we need younger people to be diplomats and representatives for our cities. Right at the moment, also, he talked about 2 other city projects that he's doing, like Rebuild Ukraine, so implementing the SDGs in partner cities, but also what I found interesting, strengthen cooperations with African regions that are now in the Russian focus. And this goes very well with what we heard in the beginning, like leave no one behind. Also, we have to be responsible for the global South. Yeah. And then I noted 3 final things, like cities need to become more powerful to stay fit for the future. Cities need to be more recognized on UN level. And all in all, what we heard in, I think, every part, what happened yesterday, let's raise the voice of the cities. Yeah, so far from my side.
Thank you for the not only great insights, but also great visualization. For me, it is always very helpful to be reminded, and it's also nice to maybe put in notes. And I see some hand clapping emojis here, so thanks a lot for that. And now let's have a quick look also specifically at the group session. And then there my colleague Livia will share the Maro board and give a short overview.
Genau, ich hoffe, genau, Mariana fängt an und Ayan fasst für Gruppe 1 kurz zusammen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yanis and Livia. I will be rather short because we are a bit short of time, and I'm happy to summarize a little bit our group discussion from day 1 on urban diplomacy for peace, where we focused on strengthening city collaborations, especially in times of migration crisis and with a background of ongoing war in Ukraine, as well as tackling the challenges of refugee integration. We did have received quite a good input of good practices from the city of Hanover, city of Düsseldorf, as well as the city of Reading, where they focused on various aspects, for example, starting with solidarity partnerships, as in the city of Hanover with the city of Mykolaiv in Ukraine, and providing humanitarian support to Mykolaiv, as well as solidarity partnership by the city of Düsseldorf with Chernovitz in Ukraine, as well as the integration of refugees and the importance of not only integrating Ukrainian refugees, but also looking into such aspects as climate affected refugees, or basically those in need after the disasters as well. So that was an important highlight. And from the city of Reading, we heard about Homes for Ukraine scheme and the importance of civil society in the process, and how local authority is in a very close coordination and communication with civil society. We did hear also about some challenges, specifically from the German cities. We've heard about financial challenges and the importance of acting very quick in times of crisis. And from the city of Reading, we heard about the housing challenge and as well as the challenge of acting very quickly on asylum claim proceedings. As of now, it's not very quick. And maybe just very few or some takeaways from the session as well. So we did learn that it's important to learn it's important to communicate among cities, between cities, and to make sure that this exchange and communication is continuous, because otherwise the good practices and the examples are basically just lost, and it's important to learn from one another. Therefore, to learn from one another through partnerships from the twin cities, but as well as through a creation of larger networks. And for example, Mayors for Peace was mentioned as well by the city of Hanover. So it's very important for cities to be active also in from that perspective, from a more international perspective. We also spoke about the bridging the gap between the local and national level, because in Reading, for example, we see that the civil society is very actively supporting the initiatives. However, sometimes there is a little bit of a gap with the national government strategy, and it's important to still act locally and be able to try to bridge those gaps. And of course, it's a challenge. And we also identified some of the topics that could be potentially interesting for further conversation among cities and between the partnerships, for example, brought up by the city of Leeds, such as human trafficking, and looking at that, what's happening in the countries receiving refugees with that perspective, as well as looking at far right and the war in Ukraine, how this comes together. Exactly. And also with regards to integration of different refugee groups, because sometimes the approaches are not necessarily equitable, and it's important to also address those challenges. And maybe just to quickly wrap up, I would like to point out what Susan Aitken said yesterday about nation states pledging and cities delivering. And I think in our group, we did learn that we did see the big willingness from the cities and power, in a sense, in acting quick, acting fast, and acting for peace. So I will stop here and I will pass forward to Livia. Thank you.
Genau, ich war in der Gruppe Urban Diplomacy for Climate Action. Ich würde da jetzt auch gar nicht genau auf alle Beispiele noch mal eingehen. Sie kriegen das auch in der Dokumentation danach. Bei allen Städten, sowohl in Deutschland als auch bei den britischen, war zu sehen, es gibt sehr, sehr viele Projekte, sehr hands-on, sehr greifbare Maßnahmen, aber auch genannt von Oxford. Wir müssen immer noch mehr tun. Wir haben Ideen, wir haben Ansätze, wir brauchen aber noch mehr Austausch, und es gibt noch weitere Möglichkeiten der Umgestaltung. Von den britischen Städten auch stark hervorgehoben, Fair and Just Transition, Leave No One Behind, dass da auch immer mitgedacht wird, dass alle sozialen Schichten auch mit einbezogen werden. Dann auch die Städte, die immer wieder hervorgehoben haben, dass sie ehrgeizigere Ziele haben, als das nationale Ziel vorhanden ist in Deutschland und in Großbritannien, dass sie klimaneutral werden wollen bis 2035 oder bis 2040. Und so eben die Städte sind, die wirklich den Willen zur Umsetzung haben und auch eben die Projekte umsetzen können. Dann eben der Blick auch über den Tellerrand hinaus, wie kann man klimaneutral werden durch Kompensation? Ohne Kompensation geht es gar nicht. Und da auch immer wieder ins Spiel gebracht, Partnerschaftsprojekte, aber auch Reduzierung von Lieferketten bzw. Emissionsausstoß in den Lieferketten und auch das Stichwort Kreislaufwirtschaft. Und was auch immer wieder fiel, war die Gesetzgebung, dass eben dadurch, dass sie teilweise eben nationale Gesetzgebung nicht so starke Ziele hat, dadurch viel getan werden muss, die Rahmenbedingungen geändert werden müssen, und tatsächlich auch konkret und nicht nur durch New Urban Agenda und urbane Development Plans, sondern dass wirklich nationale Gesetzgebung sich auch ändern muss, um Ziele erreichen zu können. Genau, soweit.
Thanks, Ayan. Thanks, Livia. I think this took a bit longer now, but I think this was still very important because it showed how much there is already in the topic of urban diplomacy to dig through and to discuss, and we want to continue this today. And we will do it with a keynote from a guest speaker. And I've, of course, informed myself before a bit about our guest speaker. And as with almost all of these experts who are really into their topic, you could go on for a long CV explanation now, but I think it's also much better, Lorenzo, if you add more on what you think is important to say about your work later. But I will still quickly explain your role. You are the founding director of City Diplomacy Lab, which is the Paris-based institute, part of Columbia University, and you are also lecturing there at the global centers, but as well at Sciences Po and École Polytechnique in Paris too. Your main expertise, and that of course makes a lot of sense here, and research interests are in the engagement of municipalities in global challenges. SDGs, we are talking here all the time. This is very much where you have a lot to say about, and from your past, I think there's some interesting things to mention as well. You were, for example, involved with City of Milan work in the World Expo 2015, and you have also worked with the International Association of Francophone Mayors. So some networking, some big events where also cities were very much involved. And you have a dual PhD from Paris and Rome. So there's also a lot of not practical, but also theoretical background. And you will now exactly talk about this, because your input is called From Theory to Practice, and you will introduce us to the theme and the concept of city diplomacy. Very nice to have you, and I will hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Yanis. It is really a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks to Livia as well for the kind invitation. And I think this is a great opportunity to bridge this theoretical and practical components of the international action of cities. And so, well, without further ado, you kindly already very perfectly introduced myself. I have one foot in one, the other in the other sector. So I'll do my best to create some coherence between the two elements. I have prepared a quick presentation. I will share my screen with you. So, well, first of all, just a quick lexical forward. Are urban and city diplomacy contradictory terms? Well, I don't think so. They just refer, from my perspective, to slightly different concepts. When we talk urban, it's a thematic definition of diplomacy. And we're talking about the urban society, the urban affairs, be it the population, the environment, the economy, and so on. When we talk about city diplomacy, we make reference to the cities as government. So city diplomacy, of course, involves doing urban diplomacy, but urban diplomacy is somehow a broader concept because, for example, also two national government or a national government and international organizations, or even two NGOs can do urban diplomacy. While for city diplomacy, you really need the municipality to be involved. And my action, in fact, as a researcher and as a practitioner, revolves around this engagement of municipal governments. That's why I use the term city diplomacy. And well, I really am happy to speaking in this conference, which has a very appropriate title. So these are really times of crisis, but luckily, the history of city diplomacy is in fact emerged as a tool to face a crisis of different nature and scope. From the beginning itself, when actually you had very representative, in fact, this meeting of the origin itself of city diplomacy with the meeting, the twinning agreements between German and the British cities just after the Second World War, when humanitarian support as well as reconstruction of ties was so important, and cities led the way, and they did so also in many other events, for example, being a component of the decolonization process. During Cold War, we had incredible meetings, such as the one in '55 in Florence, where we had around 50 mayors coming from different parts of the world to clearly state their commitment for peace and the intangibility of cities. They were among them participants, mayors from Russia and even continental China that was not yet recognized by Western countries. And of course, this continues. Yesterday, you had amazing examples on how cities are in fact engaging in facing new crises, such as in fact the war in Ukraine. So just very briefly to pass through the theory, there is an important debate in universities, in particular departments of political science. Is city diplomacy a true diplomacy? Well, my answer is yes. And this is because it embodies these 5 elements that are representative of what a diplomacy does, including, of course, traditional national foreign policy. Well, first of all, cities, they do represent themselves abroad, and they promote their ecosystem, including in the framework of economy and affairs. Then there is, of course, a collaboration, a dialogue with their counterparts, such as other cities, but also, as I mentioned, NGOs, research centers, international organizations, to identify a number of shared challenges that are addressed to the design and implementation of activities. Well, this is a big difference between, of course, national foreign policy, what we call diplomacy usually, and city diplomacy, because traditional diplomacy is in fact compelling. It is in fact binding. Can have this a treaty. Of course, cities cannot sign any treaty. A treaty is legally binding, and this means that there is a responsibility to deliver what has been written in the treaty. This is not the case for city diplomacy, because there is no guilt in not respecting a twinning agreement commitment or the participation to a city network. Nevertheless, the political commitment of local leaders and communities is so strong that, as Ms. Aitken said yesterday, they do deliver. The solutions are delivered, and they are very impactful. Of course, there is a peer learning and knowledge exchange, which is this event is an example of it. And finally, national and international advocacy, where cities join their voice towards a number of shared values. And those values, they align very much with the values defended by international organizations. And there is this rising collaboration between international organizations such as the UN and, in fact, or regional organizations as the European Union, African Union, ASEAN, and so on, with what is done at local level. In terms of practical impact, well, the connection is in fact very tangible. The reason why cities engage in that there are very important resources of different kind, political, technical, and financial kind. So this means that the political choice of a mayor can be reinforced, of course, by collaborating with cities worldwide, including difficult decisions, such as, for example, curbing carbon emissions and introducing societal change, for example, in use from moving from car to public transportation or cycling, technical resources in the framework of best practices, pilot project, new initiatives that are introduced, and of course, financial resources, which allows, in fact, the cities, including those with little financial availability to engage in those activities, because there are a number of donor, a number of partner, international, public and private institutions that are available to and willing to form partnerships to advance this sort of urban agenda regionally or globally. And you can see this very much ranges over everything that a municipality does, which are also the elements that define the quality of life of everyone. And I think, well, that focusing more precisely on Germany and the United Kingdom, there are a number of advantages that are part of their city diplomacy. First of all, it's spread and variety. This is produced by the fact that there are different kind of cities in terms of size that engage in city diplomacy, also in terms of geography. So it's not concentrated in one land or in one part of the United Kingdom, but it's truly spread, and there are so many intermediary and also small cities that engage in that. Of course, this is an old tradition, old in terms of city diplomacy, of course, and still able to innovate and introduce new ideas to the global debate and to explaining the rest of cities what a city can do when they have a clear vision and they give themselves the tools to achieve it. And finally, it's their lucky geographical position, given the fact that city diplomacy is still pretty much Eurocentric. This means that, well, this is linked to history, as decentralization is a process that is directly linked with the rise of city diplomacy, and it started first in Europe. So this is why you have more advanced facilities, partnerships that are available, networks, as well as support from regional organization, the EU, of course, but also the Council of Europe, and very important to mention, the Economic Commission for the European Union, UNEC, based in Geneva, which became recently one of the most important supporters of city diplomacy regionally and worldwide, mainly through their the first meeting of mayors embedded in an intergovernmental process, which is the Forum of Mayors. But of course, this is not, we also have a number of challenges, and those challenges are not precisely linked to those two countries, but are in fact shared with countries worldwide. The first one is particularly dear to myself. It's object of my research, is the territorial cleavages. In fact, the fact that cities, still in majority of actors in city diplomacy are from bigger and wealthier cities, allows them, of course, to grow more rapidly, to have more attractivity, to be able to benefit to a higher extent compared to other cities. And this creates inside of the same countries a fragmentation, and unfortunately, I can see that this is not getting any better. Unfortunately, it's very slowly progressing. So there is a need for an intervention. Second point, this has been mentioned in the recap previously, there are many networks. And if on one side, this is definitely the representation of vitality of the field, this is also quite not the best allocation of resources. There are so many overlaps and duplications. We can see that the beneficiaries, for example, in decentralized cooperation, they are mainly big cities in the south. They always receive the same kind of support, while this leaves other smaller cities without any support. And the fact that there are nearly 60 networks fighting climate change at the international urban level, this means that probably we can do a better job in identifying ways to merge those initiatives and collaborate more effectively. And finally, this is a big challenge, which I don't think we speak about enough, is in fact what we call proxy foreign policy. So there is no doubt that when German and British cities, they interact, they represent the will of a territory, democratically expressed through elections that brings people at the head of those cities. But well, when the British or German or any city in a democratic country interacts with a city in a non-democratic and centralized country, this is very much frequently, in fact, an interaction with the regime in power there directly, rather than a representation of a specific will of the people there. So the line is very difficult to identify. In some cases, you can do it, amazing city diplomacy with a city in a difficult political situation and even improve little by little the condition there, but it is tricky. So this is something very difficult. Those three challenges, I think they are very, very big, and they require some sort of strategy to be solved. So the question here is how to secure, consolidate, and spread the added value of city diplomacy in the UK and Germany, going through these challenges with success. Well, my 2 cents is in fact to focus on the city-university alliance, this collaboration, because there are amazing universities in both countries that can provide very important support in these 5 major areas. First of all, applied research. I know that in some universities, applied research is considered second-tier research, while scholarly research is the only valuable research. I don't think so. Applied research is, in fact, an expression of engagement of university in society, and luckily we can see its expansion. This means providing policy papers, impact assessment of different initiatives, comparative analysis, basically in a nutshell, to provide advisory material for better guide the decision. So the decision maker, the local decision maker, will have this kind of material to contribute in the decision making process. Secondly, events, city diplomacy deserves to be spread, communicated, shown, and university, they have the organizational capacity and the physical spaces to host this kind of open to the public initiatives. Project as well, because cities, they do have the capacity to engage in complex projects as partner, as a scientific partner. This is happening. Many university and research centers, including mine, were engaged with a number of cities in these kind of initiatives. Of course, education, the basic action of universities. This is both in terms of capacity building for elected officials and as well as for permanent staff members of municipalities to benefit, from these resources that I mentioned in terms of political resources, economic resources, and technical resources, and of course, university courses to create the new city diplomats, as it was mentioned yesterday. And well, finally, the advocacy. So usually universities are not seen as an actor of advocacy, but luckily this is happening more and more thanks to this engagement, this sort of global citizenship that many universities are embracing. So basically, it's a support to those core values of city diplomacy that we have, that has been mentioned before me. They include multilateralism, subsidiarity, sustainable development in all its 4 main pillars, equity, peace, multi-level, multi-stakeholder governance, etc. And well, just let me briefly mention what we are concretely doing as City Diplomacy Lab. So City Diplomacy Lab is trying exactly to do this kind of 5 pillars and put that at the service of city diplomacy, seen as an opportunity to match global values with local priorities into local solutions. And many local solutions means a real effective solution for the whole world. We work across the network of our 9, soon to be 10 centers across the world. I have the pleasure of being located in the Paris center, but I work a lot with the other centers, which include Amman, Istanbul, Tunis, Nairobi, Mumbai, Beijing, Santiago, Rio de Janeiro, and the next one will be in Athens. And of course, we have our campus in Morningside Heights in New York City. And this allows us to be active with those 5 pillars of action in all the regions of the world, in partnership with many actors, partner cities, and international organizations. These are some of the examples of the activities that we have done, in some of them in framework of international conferences, such as the Forum of Mayors in Geneva, or the World Urban Forum in Katowice in Poland last June. And we aim to give the voice of citizens, and we put this network and our capacity in terms of putting the spotlight on the voice of mayors. For example, this is a meeting we had at the UN, framing and providing a sort of assessment of the impact of the solidarity of cities of European cities with cities in Ukraine. And this was, of course, a dialogue with the help of technology and with the participation of Mayor Klitschko from Kiev. We do a lot of small size activities, from interviews to courses to municipal officers. You can see our first groups of students we're working a lot in Africa. We do French speaking and English speaking Africa. We will soon have also Portuguese speaking Africa. We will have courses in Arabic, Portuguese in Latin America, and Spanish in Latin America. So it will range in many activities, always with this idea of supporting cities achieving sustainable urban development. Here are our last 2 activities that took place at COP27. We went there with a number of cities, and we went there with universities. We led this idea of having university that I'm mentioning at the service, with university giving back their knowledge and sharing it with municipal governments and local communities. And this is working, and I invite all of you to be part of this. We will share with you, your cities, in the future, the calls for the program in Europe. The initiative will take place in Paris. They will be for free, fully covered by a fundraising organized by our co-hosting institutions. For Europe, it's the Economic Commission for Europe of the United Nations. And as you can see, we will make sure that this revolution of city diplomacy is truly widespread, and once again does not produce those challenges, but it tries to solve them with this alliance. And this will be done with a number of methodology, from long to short sort of capacity building activities, and a variety of courses. As you can see, 19 different classes that will be made available in different languages. Hopefully very soon we will also have a number of courses in Ukrainian, and this will be taught as soon as possible to reinforce the capacity of Ukrainian cities. So, of course, we do this with a number of partners. You're all welcome to join us for that, and you're all welcome to visit us in Paris at our headquarters. This is a place of study, research, and events, public programming, located in the Montparnasse neighborhood, in this beautiful building with a garden. It's a very pleasant place, a very quiet place. You're all welcome to join us very soon. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm available for any question you might have.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for introducing us to the concept, but also actually maybe taking away some difficulty from it, because it was less of a long talk about details of wording, but rather also about very concrete things that can be taken away for pushing forward the cooperation of cities, UK and Germany. We would have time now to get 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Also, just to mention that Lorenzo is still a bit with us, but he has to leave at 12 German time, so 1 hour earlier for the UK. And I see one from Stuttgart, and I would take one more if there's wish for that. If not, the question goes to Bettina Bunk, and happy to hear you now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Grandi, for your fascinating strategic elaborations on city diplomacy, and especially also on your insights on dealing with different kinds of regimes. So I wonder whether you could elaborate a little bit more on ethical questions, especially when dealing with partners in authoritarian regimes. For example, would you recommend rather to work with partners from civil society in that case, or what recommendations do you have in terms of using space for maneuver when it comes to dealing with authoritarian regimes, especially when it comes to an approach of do no harm, so that we also in our interactions always take into account what that might mean for our partners in those countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bunk. This is a very difficult question to answer, of course, and I would suggest a case-by-case analysis, in fact. So here we find, in fact, a structural difference between the traditional diplomacy and city diplomacy. Traditional diplomacy in ministries of foreign affairs, there are research components, with people that are there to provide that specific guidance on any and every non-democratic regime, highlighting the limits of interaction and what topics to touch, what topic not to touch, the level of engagement of civil society, and so on. The specific, also taking into consideration the specific legal framework of the country. Of course, cities do not have that, apart from big cities that have maybe large international relations department. So how to do this? Once again, I think universities can provide a support. So there are in every university usually experts in the different regions, and can and should in fact be asked for maybe producing a quick overview of the interaction with the specific country. I have said that unfortunately, from my perspective, I won't name any city, but they are nor British nor German. In fact, I've seen other cities from other countries interacting with non-democratic regimes, and being basically instrumentalized, being in fact became a tool for those regimes to promote themselves abroad and have a sort of a political influence over civil society abroad. So this is a very tangible risk, and it's a risk that we have both in our cities in Europe, but also in third parties, in third countries, when we're doing collaboration in different developing countries in particular. You can see that the kind of the centralized cooperation that is clearly anchored on values of human rights is very different from what happens with those non-democratic regimes. And once again, this is for a proxy foreign policy. So it is very, very difficult to have this kind of a specific assessment, but every interaction should be preceded by this sort of a brief that if the municipality is not able to produce internally, could be in fact an object of collaboration with research centers and universities.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Also in the chat, there was a point from John from Leeds, who just referred to Bettina's question and gave an example of working with cities from China. I also know that this is definitely a topic also for some German cities engaging with Chinese partners. So thanks for giving some guidance, ideas on how to try to navigate this difficult waters between keeping up international cooperation, but while also engaging in an ethical and value-driven urban diplomacy, and we will maybe be even able to pick up the topic later when we now have a fireside chat, and we'll actually look a bit more into the topic of international involvement of cities, and we have two cities who will tell us more about their experiences here. Because it's of course also what has been just mentioned by John and Bettina, the collaboration of cities when talking about urban diplomacy. So it could of course be twin city partnerships on particular topics, but city diplomacy, as Lorenzo explained, as a type of governance and a type of action by cities as actors in the international sphere, is becoming very much important as well. This year with the war on Ukraine, we heard a lot of news also from mayors in Ukraine and how they try to make or increase the awareness of the situation in specific municipalities there. I think following news, there is also I think a little bit more of a atmosphere where the best practice exchange of cities and what they do to, for example, tackle mobility challenges, climate change, and so on, it has become much more in the recent years, where cities become also let's say hidden champions in finding solutions for global challenges. And we're now going to hear from two officers, two experts in the field from both Germany and the UK, where the mayors both took a very active role in the forefront of pushing the cities, not only taking actions, but also voicing their concerns, voicing the relevancy of cities on the international stage. And these are on the one side Caroline Twig from Bristol and David Linze from Mannheim. I will quickly introduce them before or after I again thank Lorenzo for his talk. Sorry about that. I didn't feel like just moderating you out of the door. Thanks again for the kind and interesting input. I think it was very clear from your presentation. Everyone is very much invited to get in touch with you if there's more questions, and get engaged in the programs that you're offering. Thanks again. We will take your points away with us now in the fireside talk, and we'll tell you a bit about Caroline and then about David. I think they are also able, of course, to give more insight in their work in more practical terms, but just so you know who is with us today. Caroline runs the international affairs team in Bristol, a UK city, a core city which has around 470,000 inhabitants and is located in the west of England. So her role as co-heading the international affairs team in the city department is delivering an international strategy for the cities, supporting trade and investment work, and overseeing, of course, city twinning, but also EU engagement, aligning international work across city institutions, and working with the diasporas in Bristol. She also has an international background herself, as she lived and worked in Geneva, London, and Delhi, and is a publicist herself. And I don't think there is any big difference in terms of what David already all did here, just from the other side of the canal, let's say. And David has a background in political sciences, studied in Berlin, but also in Baden-Württemberg at different universities of public affairs, public administration. And while he was still studying, he became or got an important role in the Brussels office of the Association of Counties of the federal state of Baden-Württemberg. Later, then he was tasked with managing the European office of the city of Mannheim. And now in his position, he is obviously doing a lot, but I think one major achievement was the city becoming the first member of Eurocities, the network of major European cities from Baden-Württemberg. And he also transformed his department to now operate under the title of Office for EU Affairs and Global Sustainability. So welcome also David, who's head of Department of International and European Affairs and Protocol at the city of Mannheim, next to Caroline Twig, head of International Affairs. There's no applause here, so please try to feel it. But it's really great to have you, because I think your cities, as I said before, are very much the front runners or among the front runners in the topic. Maybe to start with a bit broader question, and then going a bit more in the details of what you did. I'm interested in why you think cities should be involved, and where your cities in particular got involved in the area of urban diplomacy. Maybe both of you can showcase a bit the motivation and then the concrete steps that you took. Maybe Caroline, you want to start?
There we go. Can you hear me? Great. Hi, everyone. Morning. I wish there was a fireside. I'm very cold, but it's great to be here. So a little bit of the introduction in Bristol. We developed an international strategy in 2017. We pulled together all the city organisations who have some kind of international engagement. We didn't get all of them, but we tried. So the universities, the business sector, the tourism agency, the community groups. It went really broad, and we bought a huge map of the world. We put it on the wall, and we had everyone draw where they have an engagement and what kind that is. Is it long-term, short-term? Is it funded? Is it about trade? Is it about education, culture? And we had a sort of instant view of the mapping of Bristol's engagement around the world. That led to the development of our international strategy, where we have 4 outcomes, and one of them is around raising the voices of cities in international processes. Our mayor is very driven by this topic, which helps us to be able to push it forward internally and in Bristol and abroad. He is very open about the fact when he started his term, he's now 7 years in, he didn't realise the importance of the international links as part of his role. He said it was very much focused on delivering for Bristol, but quite quickly he realised you can't do that if you have no influence about the context in which Bristol is operating. So he saw quite quickly the value of promoting Bristol abroad, but also engaging in depth with international organisations, institutions, as well as the UK government organisations and embassies that are around the world. So he changed that quite quickly, and we've had a drive for the last 7 years to do this, as well as the mayor before him. We have a small team, but we cover a very broad reach. A lot of what we do is around systems and joining up and coordination. And we have our own trade and investment unit. That's not us, but we help support their work and join up with contacts we make abroad. So I think there's a lot of drive from the city to do this and to have a sort of coordinating role. There's a lot of information sharing that goes on around the city and within the core cities group, which you mentioned, Janice, the 11 largest cities outside London, and we coordinate on some of the international work as well. But I think the drive from the mayor is a key thing.
David, go ahead.
Ja, mache ich gerne. Dankeschön. Auch danke für die Einladung und auch für die tolle Konferenz. Also ich glaube, in Mannheim war das auch ein Prozess, ein bisschen ähnlich auch wie in Bristol. Und in der Anmoderation ist es ja auch schon durchgeklungen. Also ich selber komme ja ursprünglich auch aus dem Bereich der Interessenvertretung, also Advocacy, das, was ich früher ja auch in Brüssel gemacht habe. Und Das hat mich natürlich auch entsprechend geprägt. Also die Vorstellung, die Möglichkeit, dass Kommunen auch ihre Interessen auf supranationaler Ebene vertreten können. Man muss ja auch sagen, ich fand, es kam in dem vorherigen Vortrag auch sehr gut raus. Auch auf der europäischen Ebene war das ja ein Prozess und ist ja nicht vom Himmel gefallen. Also die Kommunen haben sich sehr intensiv dafür eingesetzt, dass sie überhaupt mal anerkannt werden im europäischen Recht. Also wir haben früher mal gesagt, die Europäische Union ist eigentlich kommunal blind, und dass sich das geändert hat, war natürlich ein Erfolg auch von lokaler Interessenvertretung. Und in Mannheim haben wir einen Prozess durchlaufen, der eigentlich so aussah, dass wir, wenn ich sage wir, dann meine ich vor allem auch unseren amtierenden Oberbürgermeister Dr. Kurz, eine Reihe von Handlungsfeldern gesehen haben, von denen wir gedacht haben, die gehören eigentlich zusammen. Also die klassische Europaarbeit war früher beispielsweise in einem ganz anderen Dezernat als die Städtepartnerschaften. Und wir haben eigentlich gesagt, wir wollen diese Dinge zusammenfügen, weil sie aus unserer Sicht Synergieeffekte haben. Es kamen dann weitere Aufgaben dazu. Ein ganz wichtiges weiteres Aufgabenfeld ist die kommunale Entwicklungspolitik oder dezentralisierte Kooperation. Und wir haben all diese Aufgabenfelder zusammengefügt in einem Fachbereich, in einer Abteilung, und stellen auch fest, dass wir sehr viele Synergieeffekte hier haben. Und was bei uns auch ein ganz wichtiger sozusagen Booster war für diese Arbeit, war natürlich die Agenda 2030, weil wir haben die Agenda 2030 als Grundlage genutzt für die Neuausrichtung unserer Stadtstrategie und haben das Thema der internationalen Beziehungen auch als ein strategisches Ziel der Stadt Mannheim definiert, also eine politische Aufwertung, so ähnlich wie das auch in Bristol dann auch passiert ist. Und ich will noch eine letzte Anmerkung machen, auch Bezug nehmend auf den vorherigen Vortrag, den ich auch sehr gut fand. Wir haben auch immer wieder versucht, sag ich mal, konzeptionelle Überlegungen der Wissenschaft in unsere Arbeit zu übertragen. Also wir haben beispielsweise im letzten Jahr eine Vorlage in den Gemeinderat eingebracht, um mal dem Gemeinderat deutlich zu machen, was verstehen wir eigentlich unter Städtediplomatie. Also wir haben dann auch mal eine Definition dem Gemeinderat vorgelegt. Wir haben uns damals orientiert an der Arbeit des Chicago Council on Global Affairs, um deutlich zu machen, Städtediplomatie ist eigentlich eine konzeptionelle Klammer, die es uns ermöglicht, die verschiedenen Aktivitäten im Bereich der Außenbeziehungen zu systematisieren und auf bestimmte Ziele hin auszurichten. Und insofern halte ich das für ganz wichtig, dass wir diesen engen Austausch zwischen uns sozusagen als Praktikern, die wir ja oft sehr konkrete Projekte umsetzen, auf der einen Seite und der Wissenschaft, die sozusagen auch vordenkt, dass wir das zusammenfügen. Und insofern finde ich auch so eine Veranstaltung wie heute da sehr wichtig und sehr spannend.
Danke, David. Also ich habe jetzt auf jeden Fall viele Motivations- und Triggerpunkte sozusagen hier schon mal gefunden, mitgenommen. Natürlich sozusagen als Gesamtkonzept Städtediplomatie, als Klammer hatte David Linse gerade gesagt, aber eben auch die Synergien zu schaffen, Repräsentation zu schaffen von Städten auf politischer Ebene und die Agenda 2030 in der Verwaltung auch umfassend umzusetzen, mit einer Strategie nach innen und nach außen, also einmal die Stadtpolitik mitzunehmen, aber eben auch auf anderen Ebenen als Stadt wirksam zu werden. Vielleicht, David Linse, könnten wir noch ein Beispiel bekommen, und das leitet dann auch über zur nächsten Frage, wo Städte besonders betroffen sind von sozusagen Entscheidungen auf anderen Ebenen. Es wurde gerade sozusagen der Satz gesprochen, die EU ist kommunal blind oder war kommunal blind. Jetzt hoffentlich hat sich das schon mal etwas gelöst. Vielleicht könnten wir da 1, 2 Beispiele hören und danach würde ich zu Caroline überleiten.
Ja, also sehr gerne. Also ich will vielleicht wirklich 2 ganz konkrete Beispiele nennen, also wo wir auch ganz unmittelbar arbeiten. Ich fange mal mit der EU-Ebene an und gehe dann noch eins nach oben. Ist natürlich klar, sage ich mal, durch den Brexit ist jetzt die Europäische Union als Gesetzgeber für unsere Freunde in UK nicht mehr so relevant, wie das früher der Fall war. Aber trotzdem jetzt mal aus diesem Bereich, also unser Oberbürgermeister wird morgen zum Beispiel in Brüssel sein. Er ist auch Mitglied des Europäischen Ausschusses der Regionen, was ich übrigens auch aus politikwissenschaftlicher Perspektive für eine sehr, sehr spannende Institution halte, weil wir hier wirklich die Möglichkeit haben, dass BürgermeisterInnen an Gesetzgebungsprozessen unmittelbar mitwirken. Also zumindest haben sie ein Mitspracherecht. Und wir haben jetzt beispielsweise eine EU-Verordnung auf dem Tisch liegen, die sagt, bis 2030 müssen europäische Städte ihre städtischen Grünflächen um 3% erweitern. 3% klingt erstmal nicht nach viel. Wenn man es allerdings mal ausrechnet, dann sind es allein für eine Stadt Mannheim Dutzende von Quadratkilometern. Und das sind natürlich Fragen, wo wir einfach auch deutlich machen, also da wirkt sich supranationale Gesetzgebung unmittelbar auf uns aus. Und deswegen ist es auch wichtig, dass wir hier mitwirken, dass wir auch die Fähigkeit besitzen, als Städte uns an diesen Prozessen zu beteiligen. Und ich will ausdrücklich auch dazu sagen, es geht nicht nur darum, dass die supranationale Ebene uns diesen berühmten Seat at the Table gibt, sondern wir müssen auch Bürgermeisterinnen und Bürgermeister haben, die bereit sind, sich in diesen Gremien einzubringen. Das ist auch mit einem gewissen Ressourcenaufwand verbunden. Der zweite Punkt, da hat mein Kollege Martin van der Putten aus Dortmund ja gestern kurz Bezug genommen. Das war der G7-Prozess in diesem Jahr. Und hier natürlich auch die Frage, also warum bringen sich hier Städte ein? Also warum beschäftigen die sich sozusagen nicht mit ihren eigenen Problemen? Auch da die ganz einfache Antwort, wenn man sich das Programm der deutschen G7-Präsidentschaft für 2022 angeguckt hat, also das Programm, das die G7-Präsidentschaft selbst für sich definiert hat, dann waren viele Themenstellungen drin, die uns als Städte unmittelbar betreffen. Das betrifft natürlich den Bereich Klimaschutz, gar kein Thema, da haben wir heute schon viel drüber gesprochen, aber ich will zu bedenken geben, wir haben die Corona-Pandemie ja immer noch nicht ganz überwunden und letztlich die Frage, wie gehen wir mit der Corona-Pandemie um, hat nicht zuletzt ganz wesentlich auch die Städte betroffen, weil die Gesundheitsämter sind städtisch und insofern war es sehr offensichtlich, dass wir sagen, wir wollen die Debatten, aber auch die Ergebnisse der G7-Präsidentschaft mitgestalten. Und das ist gestern schon etwas durchgeklungen. Ich will das heute auch nochmal unterstreichen. Das war kein einfacher Prozess. Also es war nicht so, dass jetzt die nationale Ebene oder internationale Ebene gesagt hat, also prima, hier sind die Türen offen, diskutiert mit uns, sondern das war wirklich ein ziemlich auch komplexer Interessensvertretungsprozess, um überhaupt so weit zu kommen, dass sich BürgermeisterInnen an Debatten beteiligen konnten, dass auch umgekehrt Vertreter der nationalen Ebene und der internationalen Ebene sich an Debatten von Bürgermeistern untereinander beteiligen, also auch zuhören, nicht nur das Grußwort und dann wieder aus der Konferenz rausgehen, sondern wirklich auch eine Diskussion. Ich glaube, das ist uns relativ gut gelungen, aber, und das ist vielleicht auch nochmal ein Punkt zum Thema der jetzigen Session, um überhaupt dahin zu kommen, glaube ich, ist es wichtig, dass sich Städte untereinander vernetzen. Also natürlich hat Bristol einen tollen Bürgermeister, Mannheim hat einen tollen Bürgermeister. Das sind wichtige Persönlichkeiten, aber die Kraft erhalten wir als Städte dadurch, dass wir uns international vernetzen, über ICLEI, über Eurocities, über das Global Parliament of Mayors und andere Netzwerke, weil wir gemeinsam eine sehr viel stärkere Stimme haben. Und ich glaube auch nur so, ich will auch ausdrücklich den Deutschen Städtetag hier erwähnen und letztes Jahr natürlich die UK Core Cities und nur so durch dieses Zusammenschalten auch von internationalen Städtenetzwerken haben wir diese Kraft entwickeln können, um uns dann wirklich auch an den Debatten zu beteiligen und tatsächlich auch wenn man die Abschlusskommuniqués von einigen G7-Ministertreffen anguckt, also da ist sehr viel Handschrift von Städten und Städtenetzwerken auch drin.
Thanks, David, for talking some historic, but also recent examples, maybe to hand over to Caroline. What would be examples from your side where you think cities have influenced the global system, or where maybe even, you know, Bristol itself was active? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I thought of one which it is linked to David's point. So this is around migration. We were in touch in 2017 with Milan and Montreal. The mayors there were working on trying to influence the new declarations coming out of the UN around migration. So the Global Compact for Refugees and the Global Compact on Migration. The basis was that cities are the places that lose migrants, that transition migrants, and that receive migrants. Yet it's the national governments that were feeding into the declarations coming out of the UN. So the point was, we need to be part of that discussion to be shaping it effectively. We had a recent example in the UK when there was a Hong Kong migration to a particularly large, and the UK government spoke to cities and said, this is how many people we'd like you to take, and this is sort of how it will be. And we fed back that we can do this ourselves. If we talk to the other cities, we can work out the best numbers. There's places that people from Hong Kong would like to be because there's already communities there. It's not as easy as just sort of telling the cities where it should be. So for the Milan-Montreal example, these two cities gathered a few other cities around them from around the world. Freetown was involved in Sierra Leone, and we were involved. We were invited into the discussions, firstly informally, and then that sort of became the basis for what's called the Mayor's Migration Council, which is a sort of more formally recognised network, one of the many, but it has a very, very specific topic. It has a steering group of mayors, and they feed directly into international processes and agreements around migration. So the mayor in Bristol actually spoke at the UN. He was one of the first to do this in this way for this particular process, and brought the city's voice, brought the reflections of what it is to lose migrants, to receive migrants, and when many people pass through your city, how that is. So when the compacts were actually adopted in December in 2018, there was 150 city leaders endorsed the declaration. It was done in Marrakesh, calling for the full and formal recognition of the role of local authorities in implementing these compacts, and saying we need to input into the reviews and the feedback processes, the monitoring, and then any sort of reiterations in the future about the wording. So that was a really specific example. I mean, that started in 2017. It's still ongoing. As David said, this isn't a overnight sort of switch that you bring a lot of information and it's done. It is a process, and it's slow and quite complicated, but we are seeing results, seeing specific examples more and more now. I think an interesting point to make is that years ago we were pushing as cities to have a voice at the table, to be there and to be represented, and it's increasingly now turned into, well, what are you trying to say? So cities are needing to collaborate and to go with really specific targets and tangible sort of ideas and topics, rather than just asking for a seat at the table. It's moved beyond that.
Danke, Caroline. Bevor wir vielleicht noch etwas stärker dann auch einsteigen in praktische Fragen, wie Städte sich denn engagieren können und was sie auch dafür brauchen, vielleicht nochmal eine Rückfrage an David. Es kam schon auf G7 als Plattform, auf der sich Städte eben engagieren können. Interessanterweise die G7-Präsidentschaft oder Vorsitz ist jetzt weitergegeben worden von UK an Deutschland. Als nächstes steht Japan an. Was ist denn da vielleicht noch aus Städtesicht auch zu erwarten? Es gibt da diesen Zusammenschluss der Urban Seven. Es gibt da sozusagen schon einen Fortschritt. Wo würden Sie sich das sozusagen hinentwickeln wollen? Der Satz hat nicht ganz gepasst. Also was wären vielleicht Wünsche, wie sich das dort noch weiterentwickeln kann?
Ja, nee, das passt sehr gut. Also tatsächlich ist es so, wir haben nächste Woche eine Sitzung virtuell, also intern ist es keine öffentliche Veranstaltung, mit den sozusagen Repräsentanten sozusagen der Städteverbände, also es ist nicht immer so 1:1 vergleichbar aus den G7-Staaten, Und es geht natürlich jetzt darum, dass man hier eine gute Übergabe hinbekommt. Und es ist vielleicht einfach auch ganz interessant für die Kolleginnen und Kollegen, die heute teilnehmen, auch zu erfahren, also dass wir natürlich im Hintergrund jetzt sehr stark auch daran arbeiten, dass die japanische Präsidentschaft auch diese Beteiligungsmöglichkeiten von Städten fortsetzt. Das ist ein Ziel, auf das wir auch entsprechend hinarbeiten. Und im Hinblick auf die Frage, was wir uns sozusagen noch wünschen, möchte ich vielleicht auch noch mal ganz kurz Bezug nehmen auf den Vortrag von Professor Grandi, weil er hat ja, wie ich finde, richtigerweise darauf hingewiesen, dass wir natürlich ein gewisses Ungleichgewicht haben zwischen, sage ich mal, den großen europäischen Städten, die sich hier sehr stark engagieren, also natürlich auch kanadische Städte, USA, und der Frage, wie beteiligen wir eigentlich Städte aus dem globalen Süden an diesen Debatten. Und da will ich darauf hinweisen, dass das für uns ein ganz wichtiger Punkt war und immer noch ist. Und wir haben als Städte auch gesagt, also man kann ja das Konzept der G7 durchaus auch kritisch sehen. Es ist ja ein sehr exklusiver Club von Staaten, wobei ich auch dazu sagen muss, was natürlich wiederum bei diesem Format sehr wirkmächtig ist, dass man eine gemeinsame Wertebasis hat. Also gerade die Frage, die natürlich in diesem Jahr sehr stark im Vordergrund stand, die Frage von Frieden, Demokratie, das waren natürlich Fragestellungen, die aus der G7 heraus sehr klar auch beantwortet werden konnten. Da haben sich die G20 ja natürlich schwerer getan, wie wir wissen. Aber das ist ein anderes Thema. Aber was ich sagen wollte ist, wir haben deswegen frühzeitig gesagt, wir wollen eigentlich in den Debatten, die wir als Städte führen und in den Erklärungen, die wir verabschieden, es gab ja dann einen U7 Mayor Summit dieses Jahr. Wir wollen hier auf jeden Fall auch die Perspektive des globalen Südens berücksichtigen. Und da kam das Global Parliament of Mayors ins Spiel. Und da ist vielleicht auch interessant zu sehen, auch anschließend an Professor Grandi, also wenn man sich anguckt, welche Bürgermeister zuletzt Mitglieder des Global Parliament of Mayors geworden sind, würde ich mal sagen, zu 80% BürgermeisterInnen aus Afrika im Besonderen und im globalen Süden im Allgemeinen. Ja? Also das heißt, wir haben da eine Plattform, über die sich vor allem auch BürgermeisterInnen aus dem globalen Süden politisch artikulieren können. Und deswegen haben wir das Global Parliament of Mayors strukturell in diesen G7, U7-Prozess eingebunden und hatten dadurch sozusagen immer auch sichergestellt, dass wir nicht, ich sag mal, zu eurozentristisch bleiben in unseren Debatten, ne, sondern dass wir wirklich auch gucken, wie wird es eigentlich gesehen in Afrika beispielsweise, die Debatten, die wir führen. Und das ist ein Punkt, der uns sehr wichtig war und der, glaube ich, auch weiterhin wichtig sein sollte, dass wir uns wirklich als globale Städtefamilie auch entsprechend verstehen.
Yes, thanks also for shedding light again on the responsibilities of those who are already at the table to think about those who are not yet, and how the collaboration then can bring those voices in there. I think this is a good transition to the question, what barriers are there actually in place at the moment for cities to engage globally, and how we can make them, or how we can enable them to contribute. Maybe Caroline, you can start with some points from your head.
Yeah, I think a couple about the international side. So, and we talked about this already, the UN was built around national governments as the key way of existing. So there was a initiative, and I've forgotten the name, but it's about UN reform, the UN we want to see, which is about the UN at 75 years. And there's a lot of work there about saying, are the different organizations around the world, civil society, for example, cities, for example, are they inputting enough? Because it's a very different world from 75 years ago. In the same way, national governments ask their different actors, different groups to feed into them, but that happens in different ways in very different countries. So it doesn't feel good enough for the UN to say we've had input from cities through their national government, because that happens very differently in just Germany and the UK. It happens differently in every single country. So the representation is not consistent, and that's an issue. And then I think one that takes us back to our cities a bit is we find it, and I know we're not alone, often very hard to justify international engagement to our local citizens in Bristol. If the mayor travels, there's instantly a newspaper article about how this is presumably a waste of money to fly around the world. It doesn't match with our climate strategy. Sort of a very nice thing to do, but what's the point? People often don't see it as, if they need their rubbish collected, if they need their schools to be operating, how does this link? We're not very good, I will openly say, we're not very good at communicating this properly, often because the impact that happens through city diplomacy is, it's slow, it's over time, it's a very convoluted process to say there was a meeting here at the other side of the world and 5 years later it led to this bit of investment in a particular part of Bristol. It's hard to understand that, and it's hard to communicate it. So that's a barrier that we see here sort of very much every day in Bristol, and I know we're not alone at that. I know David has some things to add, I suspect. There's a long list of barriers, unfortunately.
Ja, also ich finde die Punkte von Caroline stimmen allem zu. Also ich will vielleicht auf 3 Punkte ganz kurz eingehen. Auch hier nochmal dieses Thema Transfer dann auch in die Wissenschaft. Ich glaube, es ist wichtig, dass wir noch stärker konzeptionell daran arbeiten, wie messen wir die Wirkung von Städtediplomatie. Also ich glaube, hier brauchen wir auch die Unterstützung der Wissenschaft. Also es schließt an das an, was Caroline gesagt hat. Letztlich, wie begründen wir auch zu Hause, was ist der Mehrwert auch für die Stadt, dass wir hier Ressourcen reingeben. Ein zweiter Punkt, das ist jetzt mehr so ein bisschen auf dem Wunschzettel, den man ja vor Weihnachten macht, bezogen auf die deutsche Situation. Wir haben 2 Ministerien, die sich mit dem Thema Städtediplomatie insbesondere befassen. Das Auswärtige Amt, das ja die heutige Veranstaltung auch unterstützt, und natürlich auch das BMZ. Beides auch für uns in Mannheim sehr wichtige Ressorts. Ich glaube, es wäre gut, wenn man hier noch stärker die Politiken koordinieren würde und schauen würde, dass so diese Unterstützung dessen, was die Städte machen durch den Bund, dass das eine Politik aus einem Guss ist. Und der dritte Punkt, das ist natürlich das ganz große Brett, das es zu bohren gilt, ist natürlich die Frage, wie gelingt es uns, die Mitwirkungsrechte oder Mitwirkungsmöglichkeiten von Städten in internationalen politischen Prozessen zu institutionalisieren. Also wirklich eine institutionalisierte Multilevel Governance. Wir stellen das einfach fest, dass schon alleine innerhalb Europas, und weltweit gilt es natürlich in besonderer Weise dann, es höchst unterschiedlich ist von Nationalstaat zu Nationalstaat, ob und wie Städte an internationalen politischen Prozessen mitwirken können. Ja? Also sind sie zum Beispiel Teil ich will jetzt explizit nicht auf die Delegation abstellen, weil dann denken die Menschen immer, es geht uns darum, dass wir verreisen wollen. Nein, wir wollen an den Verhandlungen beteiligt werden. Also sind Bürgermeister Teil der Verhandlungsdelegation bei internationalen Abkommen beispielsweise. Da glaube ich, braucht es langfristig klare, verbindliche Regelungen, weil sonst sind Städte letztlich immer davon abhängig, was ist gerade sozusagen die jeweilige politische Linie des Nationalstaats. Und deswegen möchte ich nochmal als letzten Punkt sagen, ich glaube, es ist ganz wichtig, wenn wir über die Frage sprechen der Mitwirkungsmöglichkeit von Städten an supranationalen politischen Prozessen, dass wir immer an den Nationalstaat denken. Meine langjährige Erfahrung ist, die supranationalen Institutionen, UN-Habitat, die Europäische Kommission, das Europäische Parlament, wer auch immer, sind sehr offen, sehr interessiert daran, dass Städte sich beteiligen, dass ein Dialog mit Bürgermeisterinnen und Bürgermeistern stattfindet. Die Frage, ob das dann jeweils rechtlich geht, wird in der Regel durch den Nationalstaat entschieden. Es ist die nationale Regierung, die die wesentlichen Entscheidungen trifft. Insofern müssen wir immer auch sozusagen in diesem Dialog zwischen der kommunalen und der internationalen Ebene immer auch den Dialog mit der nationalen Ebene suchen, sonst funktioniert das Ganze nicht. Also das ist wirklich dieses Multi-Level Governance. Alle politischen Ebenen müssen den Willen haben, gemeinsam zu arbeiten und sich vielleicht auch von der einen oder anderen, sage ich mal, eher hierarchisch geprägten Vorstellung lösen und tatsächlich zu einer Governance, also einer Multi-Level und Multi-Stakeholder-Governance dann auch tatsächlich kommen, wo wir gleichberechtigt über die verschiedenen politischen Ebenen zusammenarbeiten.
Thanks to both of you to really compile a very concrete list also what can be done or what are barriers currently. And this, I think, is also maybe some, let's say, homework for all the cities to get engaged. Not like they can get engaged with the supranational organizations, but they are very open. But so it's a lot also on bringing this to the attention of national lawmakers and decision makers, and yeah, kind of pre-negotiate the seat at the table on the national level, so that then in the other levels it works well. Also, I think there was a nice link back to Lorenzo's talk about the universities and the role of research to make sure that we know what the impact is of urban diplomacy, and maybe this also going beyond just very practical things, being there's a new company who expands their branches and comes to a city and brings new workplaces, but there's much more than that, thinking about the SDGs and what cities can do there. I would like to now move to our last question, to look beyond today and ask you, what are your hopes? What do you want to see in the area of urban and city diplomacy in the coming, let's say, 5 years? And maybe we can start with Caroline here, followed by David.
Just briefly, I think David's picked up on quite a few just now, and we've covered some, but the formalized role, we're talking about G7, the voices from the global south, it's already been said, why is that not G20, for example? I would like to see a better understanding with our national government about where the sustainable development goals sit and which part of the FCDO should we be talking to. It moves around a lot, it's not consistent, and I would like to see that much more structured. More training and more skills for officers within local authorities to be able to engage on these topics and to understand their role. There's so much of inconsistency, and in some ways that works in our favour, and in some ways I think it doesn't. I hope the US has just this year announced, and they're now in place, the special representative on subnational diplomacy, and it's a former city representative who takes that role. I would love to see that kind of position made in other places, and then a network of those people. And I would love to see more cities involved very sort of proactively in the city networks that are most appropriate to them. We've realised, as I think most cities have, you can't engage in every city network. You have to choose your priority ones, either geographically or by topic, and you have to really put resources in to help them have impact and to gain benefit from that membership. So if cities can do that in a very structured or very deliberate way, I think they'll all have more impact. So that's just a few.
Ja, ich kann vielleicht noch 2 Hoffnungen oder Wünsche auch noch anschließen, sozusagen mit Blick auf die kommenden Jahre. Das eine ist, ich hoffe und wünsche mir, dass der neue Blick, wenn ich das so formulieren darf, auf die internationalen Städtebeziehungen, der entstanden ist durch die Agenda 2030, aber jetzt nochmal in ganz besonderer Weise durch den Krieg gegen die Ukraine, dass sich dieser neue Blick verstetigt. Also dass wirklich erkannt wird, wir haben hier ein in hohem Maße politisches Format. So begannen ja auch die Städtepartnerschaftsbewegung. Also Professor Grandi hat es ja wunderbar ausgeführt. Die Städtepartnerschaftsbewegung ist eigentlich höchst hochpolitisch. Sie ist entstanden in einer Zeit, als unsere Länder Erzfeinde waren. Damals sind die Städtepartnerschaften entstanden und damals sind übrigens auch die internationalen Städtenetzwerke entstanden. Also der Rat der Gemeinden Europas, wie er damals hieß, also heute der CMA, ist ja zeitgleich entstanden mit den bilateralen Städtebewegungen, Städtepartnerschaften als eine politische Bewegung. Und ich habe es sehr bemerkenswert gefunden, dass der Präsident der Ukraine und der deutsche Bundespräsident bei ihrem Zusammentreffen in diesem Jahr die Schirmherrschaft übernommen haben für das deutsch-ukrainische Städtepartnerschaftsnetzwerk. Also das war die politische Kernaussage, als das deutsche Staatsoberhaupt in der Ukraine war. Ist schon bemerkenswert politisch. Und ich würde mir wünschen, dass diese politische Wahrnehmung sich verstetigt, weil dadurch, glaube ich, auch nochmal deutlicher wird, also Städtepartnerschaften, und ich verstehe Städtepartnerschaften als Teil von Städtediplomatie, ist nicht etwas nice to have, sondern ist wirklich ein wichtiges politisches Instrument. Und ich würde mir wünschen, dass vor diesem Hintergrund auch die nationale politische Ebene, da spreche ich jetzt mal nur für Deutschland, das Wissen und die Fähigkeiten und Kompetenzen bei den Städten auch noch stärker strukturell einbindet. Also wir haben jetzt heute schon kurz über China gesprochen, oder im Chat kam es ja auch entsprechend. Also ganz konkreter Wunsch, wenn die Bundesrepublik Deutschland eine neue China-Strategie macht, fände ich es einfach gut, wenn eine Konsultation mit den Städten auch entsprechend stattfände. Zweiter Punkt, auch ganz kurz, ich würde mir auch wünschen, dass die nationale Ebene vielleicht noch etwas stärker erkennt, welches Potenzial in den internationalen Städtenetzwerken vorhanden ist, wenn es darum geht, mit dem globalen Süden zusammenzuarbeiten. Es gibt eine großartige Entwicklungspolitik, eine deutsche Entwicklungspolitik der Europäischen Union, vieler nationaler Regierungen. Und ich würde mir wünschen, dass hier auch erkannt wird, wenn ich Demokratie stärken will, lokale Demokratie, und darum ging es ja auch gestern, ja, dann habe ich ein Netzwerk, ein Beispiel zu nennen, das Global Parliament of Mayors oder auch andere, wo ich genau mit Bürgermeisterinnen und Bürgermeistern zusammenarbeiten kann, die vor Ort versuchen, und es ist ja gerade von Caroline das Beispiel der Bürgermeisterin von Freetown, Sierra Leone genannt worden, die übrigens zu Hause, wir wissen das, politisch enorm unter Druck steht, enorm, ja, und dass wir solche Netzwerke nutzen, um die Idee von lokaler Demokratie im globalen Süden auch entsprechend zu stärken. Hier sind wunderbare Tools da. Das Global Parliament of Mayors hat ein virtuelles Parlament, ja, das eine Beteiligung auch ermöglicht, ohne dass ich weit reise, über virtuelle Möglichkeiten. Und da finde ich es ganz toll, wenn die nationalen Regierungen oder die nationalen Ministerien diese Potenziale erkennen könnten und sich vielleicht dann auch entsprechend dafür einsetzen würden, dass diese Netzwerke auch mit entsprechenden Ressourcen ausgestattet werden, die sie natürlich brauchen. Vielen Dank.
Danke, David Linse, danke, Carolyn Twigg. Das war jetzt auch nochmal von beiden ein flammendes Plädoyer in alle Richtungen, in Richtung der nationalen Regierungen, mehr Möglichkeiten, Instrumente einzurichten, globaler zu denken, die verschiedenen Programme zusammenzubringen, aber auch ein Plädoyer in Richtung der Städte, sowohl diejenigen, die Städtepartnerschaften haben und die im Sinne der Gründungsidee dieser Städtepartnerschaften politisch auch zu nutzen, und an diejenigen, die vielleicht diese Städtepartnerschaften nicht haben, aber andere Dinge haben, dort sich zu engagieren und das vielleicht aber auch am Ende ebenfalls wieder zusammenzubringen. Ich fand, das war ein toller Einblick. Vielen Dank für Ihre Arbeit in Bristol, in Mannheim. Und ich hoffe, dass unsere Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer sich da einiges von mitnehmen konnten, ein bisschen Inspiration für die Arbeit. Ich habe auch auf jeden Fall einige Klatsch-Emojis hier wieder gesehen. Mit diesem tollen Input wollen wir Sie einmal in eine Pause entlassen, die Sie sich nach zwei wichtigen, interessanten Inputs jetzt verdient haben. Wir würden um 12:20 Uhr deutscher Zeit, 11:20 Uhr UK-Zeit wieder zusammenkommen, also 15 Minuten Pause, Fenster auf, falls es Ihnen nicht zu kalt ist, Kaffee oder alternatives Getränk, und dann sehen wir uns gleich wieder hier für die Gruppenaustausche. Vielen Dank nochmal, David Linse, Carolyn Twigg. Hello, welcome back. I hope you all had the chance to grab a refreshment in the form of some air or water or coffee. Would be great to have you back here with also some faces as to prepare ourselves mentally for the direct exchanges in the groups, and also to know if you were actually back from the coffee break or if we're still missing some of you. All right, I would still start with introducing the next block and to get everyone to set the scene for what is coming. And for that, we first want to have some interaction also here in the plenary room. So we all switch a bit the mode from listening to actually discussing and thinking. So that's why we use the Mentimeter here again. You have been acquainted with it yesterday. And if you go to menti.com or you use the QR code with your phone on the screen of your laptop or your computer, and then enter the code 76383820, then you will end up on this slide. I always feel a little bit like a TV presenter when I read out those numbers. So don't call, but type the code 76383820 again in the Menti, so you have the chance to answer the following question, which is, what do you associate with urban diplomacy? And we would actually be very interested now that we had a lot of different perspectives on the topics. What kind of caught your attention, or what is your personal experience from the work within your cities? How would you interpret the term practically? And yeah, let us know through the Menti, and we will have a look what is coming up. So I think, yeah, as already said, there is also the range in not only the inputs, but in what participants have on their mind, or what they maybe practice in their everyday work in the cities. So there is definitely the very much lobbying and political participatory area here, advocacy, then some aspects of twinning, international city networks, city-to-city cooperation, but then also much broader terms, which can span over all these ranges of activities that can fall under urban or city diplomacy, which is networking, partnering, working on progress and influence, knowledge exchange, learning several times. I can read here. It's also the big word in the center, cooperation and communication, networking. So a big, and friendships. Friendships is maybe a very nice word to end this little exercise. Something that was, I think, discussed yesterday a lot, and David Linze brought it up today in the fireside talk also, that it is not only a responsibility, but also a goal of city-to-city cooperation and urban diplomacy to really put ourselves in the shoes of other cities around the globe, specifically in the global south, and to create those personal connections on a working level, but also better understanding and working together. So I think that's a nice note to move over to our two parallel interactive exchanges, where cities can discuss the multilateral processes and partnerships for SDGs, and we will split you up and have two groups. There will be a moderation of the discussion with some guiding questions, and we will try to, of course, discuss urban diplomacy mechanisms, but also who's involved as an actor and how the process can be done practically, especially when using the 2030 agenda and the SDGs as localization tools and tool of using as a red thread for your work in the cities. And Livia, maybe you can help me out. How do we split the cities now? Are we still using the surname with the L?
Yes. All surnames with L go to the group 2, and L and after L until Z, they go to group 2. The link of the Zoom group 2 will be posted in the chat, and all the other people with the surname with the letter A until M, is it M? K, they will stay here. Beside the people we wrote directly in the chat, like Caroline Twig will join group 1, David Linze will join group 2, and Verena Schwarte group 1. So we hope it's equilibrated. Okay.
Exactly.
So yeah. I also leave already to group 2.
Yes. So we'll see back here in around 35 minutes. Enjoy your exchanges. Groups. I think it will be very interesting now to hear from both groups what was, let's say, the results of this kind of peer-to-peer consultation, and hear some insights before we are slowly coming towards the end of our today exchange and conference. Actually, because we just had the group joining, let's have them being our guests and listen to them first. So group number 2, maybe there is volunteers who would like to highlight one or two of their main takeaways that they noted down, or that they will maybe even when switching off from Zoom and going back to emails that you might take away and be in the afternoon, in the evening, going home, still thinking about. Maybe you can share some things about that. If there's takers for sharing one or two of the highlights, please raise your hand. That would be wonderful, so I know who I can hand over to. Also, just to mention again, no worries about note-taking and documentation. There were graphic recordings and notes in the Miro board taken for both groups, so there will be documentation in the end for both of them. But just so we can hear from you personally, that would be nice. Who could I motivate, maybe? Let's have maybe one UK representative and one German representative from both groups to keep the spirit. You see Heather, great, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, one inspirational thing that I heard about from the city of Mannheim, David said that there were round tables convened whereby the City Council and civil society, particularly with BAME groups, would talk about international activity, particularly in relation to the Global South, to make sure that they're on the right track and that the right communication comes from any activity that's engaged in. I thought that was a brilliant idea. That's not something that we do in the city of Birmingham, but it's certainly an idea that I'm going to keep at the back of my mind and use it when we can.
Perfect, thank you. A great example of very concrete takeaway for a new tool or a new form of engagement that you can try out in your own procedures and structures. Someone from the German side, from group 2, who would like to maybe share one thing, one example, one tool that they took away, or something that you shared and you just want to share with the other part of the group as well.
Yes, maybe I can speak for the group. I took away a lot from Heather's ideas. She explained how they try to justify, for example, travel costs or like engagements with their partners. And I found it very interesting that they really try to make it measurable, like also the outcome, and to try to communicate kind of what benefits they have by, for example, writing blog posts and really involving the media. Yeah, and just reaching out to the public. I think this is something I will definitely take away with to kind of look at our let's call it public relations strategy we have here in place, and see how we can kind of improve it and really try to make it more measurable, more transparent to the public. So that was a very interesting point.
Thanks. So that's great to see. Heather took something away, but you were definitely also able, obviously, to inspire others. Thanks to Liana for sharing that. And I think it kind of also relates to what was discussed in group 1 with me, where it was about awareness and that it takes long and it's a long-term work that you have to do again and again. And here the example that was just shared was about explaining and trying to show why it is relevant, why you need those resources and why you have these travel costs. Maybe there's again 2, I call them now representatives from group 1 who would like to give an idea of what you take away.
I could start. Maybe we talked a lot about the SDGs, or we touched on it, and the difference between Germany and UK to some extent, whether they're sort of promoted by the government, or understood or explained, whether it's easy to engage with the government on SDGs. There's a couple of us from the UK that said we find it quite hard to know where to go to and who sort of owns it and how much is it talked about broadly by the public. It made me think this is where international issues, you can actually use them as a sort of hook to engage your national government rather than the other way around. So trying to talk about the SDGs by saying lots of other countries and cities are doing this very differently from us. You have an opportunity to be a leader rather than just following. This is a global language, it's a global action. Maybe we can use that international issue, bring it into our national government to support some of those discussions rather than having it the other way around.
Do we get one more before closing? I'm pretty sure there is more to share. Verena, yes, thanks.
I think that we had a quote from John from Leeds, that international relations is the work of a gardener, a long-term thing. And I think that describes very well what we are doing, that it takes a long time to harvest the seed, what is coming out of the seeds. I think it was a very nice thought. on this.
Thanks, Verena, for sharing that. Perfect. Great work in the 2 exchange groups. As I said before, we will be able to get the notes and recordings of the 2 exchanges later on. But we would like to now try to kind of wrap up and make close circles here. And we have a mentee that you might remember from the very start if you were around. And we would like to come back to it and see if we have been able to be gardeners here and grow the plant a little bit. So if you have your device ready, go to menti.com again and use the code 76383820 and answer the question, how familiar are you with the concept of urban diplomacy now? Maybe we are also able to see some difference, but that's no pressure here. Really go ahead with how you feel now acquainted with this topic. All right. See some more orange drops popping in. All right, some small group of experts mingling, but then there's definitely a great bunch of people who feel like, yes, I'm good. I have some knowledge around, and I think knowledge also doesn't mean you can cite and some literature and just explain things, but maybe feel knowledgeable and ready to work further and to learn and exchange and try to challenge yourself with the topic a bit more. Go abroad over the current framework maybe that you are exercising in your cities. And let's see now what will be actually ahead of us. I think that's a good transition. Just before that, because I think many of you wonder, I've already touched upon it. The presentations and all the input, they will be processed. The presentations will be delivered to you as soon as possible, together with the graphic recordings of today. So there's I had to Google before if advent calendar are even a thing in the UK, but there is. So hopefully you get a little door tomorrow with a nice graphic recordings and also the presentations to dig through and go a bit more acquainted and continue this gardening exercise. And there will be a more thorough documentation done then, and you receive that probably early in next year. But I have Livia here who can also give you probably even more exciting information about how the exchange program will continue.
Genau, herzlichen Dank. Sie sehen die Präsentation aber noch nicht in groß jetzt. Gut, genau, ich würde sagen, wir hatten einen ganz guten Austausch, war mein Eindruck. Gerne können Sie uns gleich später noch Feedback geben, sage ich gleich noch was dazu. Wir hatten jetzt auch, habe ich gerade nochmal nachgeguckt, die Veränderung von how familiar are you with diplomacy, und bei Slide Idea hatten wir gestern 14 Punkte, heute einen, also von dem her haben wir da, glaube ich, auf jeden Fall ein bisschen was erreicht.
Entschuldigung.
Ja.
Also Sie sind gerade noch in der Referentenansicht. Wenn Sie wahrscheinlich auf Anzeigereinstellungen gehen, weil man sieht dann Ihre Notizen und so.
Das dürfte nicht so viel. Genau, ich probiere es gleich nochmal. Jetzt?
Jetzt noch auf Vollbildschirm? Nee, ist immer noch. Gehen Sie mal auf Anzeigeeinstellungen. Genau,
Okay.
super.
Gut. Noch ein technisches Problem am Schluss, wie immer. Genau, also die nächsten Schritte im Projekt, was wir jetzt auch aus der Veranstaltung noch mal mehr mitnehmen als sowieso schon. Wir bauen noch mehr Beziehungen zu verschiedenen Akteuren auf. Nicht nur zu den britischen, also nicht nur zu dem aktuellen Fokus, was jetzt kommt, insgesamt eben im Bereich Urban Diplomacy. Das führt auch zu der Vernetzung zu mehr Akteuren auf internationaler und EU- und nationaler Ebene. UN-Habitat wurde ja öfters mal genannt. Wir sind mit denen in Kontakt, nicht nur bezüglich VLR, sondern eben auch bezüglich zukünftiger Zusammenarbeit. Von dem her, Stuttgart hatte das gestern angebracht, wenn Sie eben konkrete Bedarfe sehen oder ja konkret an Prozessen festmachen können, lassen Sie es uns wissen, damit wir eben mit möglichst greifbaren Bedarfen auch an die EU- und internationalen Institutionen herantreten können. Dann auch, was immer wieder viel der Bezug zu wissenschaftlichen Ergebnissen, Science Diplomacy, dass man da einfach sich mehr noch mit auseinandersetzt oder das Wissenschaftliche mit in den Diskurs reinbringt. Wir sind schon in Kontakt mit DLR, wir bauen zu Universitäten vielleicht zukünftig so ein bisschen Verbindungen auf, wobei das natürlich auch viel in der kommunalen Hand liegt. Genau, aber da versuchen wir Synergien zu schaffen und insgesamt auch den Multilevel-Governance-Ansatz noch zu stärken und die nationale Ebene auch mehr in ihre Pflicht zu nehmen. Das Auswärtige Amt war gestern dabei, es wird auch im Juni mit dabei sein, aber dass da Prozesse auch einfach noch kohärenter laufen. Dann sind wir vom Team natürlich sehr dann die nächsten Monate auch beschäftigt mit der Organisation der Konferenz im Juni. Und dazu noch mal kurz der Überblick der Zeitleiste für das kommende Jahr. Also diejenigen Städtepartnerschaften, die dann noch im Dezember ausgewählt werden. Sie kriegen voraussichtlich nächste Woche Bescheid, ob oder ob nicht. Und wir haben eben nur 8 Plätze, also nur für 8 Partnerschaften die Möglichkeit, dass sie bei der Partnerschaftskonferenz im Juni mit teilnehmen. Ob die in Deutschland oder Großbritannien stattfindet, ist zum jetzigen Zeitpunkt noch nicht klar, wird aber dann Anfang des Jahres kommuniziert. Und genauso eben werden die 4 Partnerschaften informiert, die dann die Fachaustauschreisen nächstes Jahr machen können. Dann noch kurz ein Hinweis zur Community. Wir versuchen auch virtuell uns zu vernetzen. Auf der Engagement Global Community zu Urban Diplomacy Exchange. Den Link und die Präsentation kriegen Sie dann auch heute oder spätestens morgen. Können Sie eben auch sich selber noch mehr vernetzen. Dort sind auch die Vertreterinnen und Vertreter der Deutschland-USA-Komponente mit drin. Und wir versuchen da nach und nach noch ziemlich im Aufbau Dateien abzulegen, vielleicht auch mal eine Umfrage zu machen, an welchem Thema Sie besonders interessiert sind. Oder Sie, also vor allem auch für Sie, dass Sie dort einfach auch interessante Links posten und sich gegenseitig vernetzen. Dann der Hinweis auf 2 Veranstaltungen. Die eine hier von Urban Exchange, das ist quasi unser Partnerprojekt, das vom Deutschen Hochschulverband international durchgeführt wird und auch vom Auswärtigen Amt gefördert wird. Wenn Sie das sich schon mal merken, das findet allerdings morgen Vormittag statt und dort sind auch Volkshochschulen von Deutschland, Ukraine, Großbritannien und ich glaube USA mit beteiligt. Können Sie einfach auf den Link gehen oder einfach bei Google schon mal sich das Programm anschauen und geht auch sehr viel Richtung Urban Diplomacy und Digitalisierung. Genau. Am 13. Dezember nächste Woche findet auch noch eine ganz interessante Online-Veranstaltung statt. Vielleicht zumindest für diejenigen, die aus dem Umweltbereich auch kommen. Da geht es um Heat Islands und ist von unserem Nachbarprojekt Connective Cities, die auch bei uns in der Abteilung angesiedelt sind. Da ist der Anmeldeschluss auch noch offen bis 13. Dezember. Genau, ich glaube, das war alles. Dann noch zu Evasus. Wir freuen uns auch auf offizielles Feedback zur Veranstaltung, damit wir eben zukünftige Veranstaltungen noch besser machen können. Dass die Pausen diesmal ein bisschen knapp waren, ist uns bewusst. Da werden wir auf jeden Fall nächstes Mal ein bisschen mehr Zeit einberechnen. Genau, aber lassen Sie uns gerne das offizielle Feedback in den nächsten Tagen oder vielleicht spätestens nächste Woche zukommen. Und wenn Sie da einmal den QR-Code abfotografieren, kommen Sie direkt auf die Umfrage, beziehungsweise wird der Link auch gleich in den Chat gestellt. Genau, das war's von meiner Seite aus. Ich nehme gern noch Fragen entgegen. Wenn es welche gibt. Ansonsten auch gerne bilateral oder einfach bei mir oder Ayan Huseinova durchrufen.
Thanks, Livia, for already showing the way forward and how you all can continue to stay in touch and engaged in the program. I think from my side, there is not a lot to say other than thanks for the inspirations, for the imaginaries, for sharing all the work that you do in urban diplomacy. So I think I think it's always nice for the closure, if you like, to open your camera and we can all have our mics on and just say goodbye and see you next time.
Bye.
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 Herzlichen Dank an alle.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
All the
Ciao.
best.
Bye.
Merry Advent season from Stuttgart.